I walked into my room to find my jewelry box empty. 20 years of precious memories gone. My parents had sold everything to fund my brother's dream vacation to Europe. They thought I'd just accept it. They were wrong. What I did next changed our family forever. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you're ready to hear how I stood up for myself, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of justice served. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. My name is Jessica, and I'm 24 years old. For most of my life, I thought being the older sibling meant setting an example, being responsible, and sometimes making sacrifices for the family. What I didn't realize was that I'd been conditioned to accept being treated as less important than my younger brother Tyler. This is the story of how I finally woke up and took back what was rightfully mine. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when my entire world shifted. I had just come back from what I thought was a promising job interview at a marketing firm downtown. I was feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. After graduating college, I'd moved back home temporarily to save money while job hunting, and living with my parents again had been more challenging than I expected. But that day, I felt like things were finally looking up. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, eager to change out of my interview clothes and maybe celebrate with some takeout. But when I opened my door, something felt wrong. The room looked exactly the same, yet different somehow. It took me a moment to realize what was missing. My jewelry box, which always sat on my dresser with its lid slightly open, showing glimpses of the treasures inside, was closed. That wasn't unusual, but something nagged at me. I walked over and lifted the lid, expecting to see my grandmother's pearl necklace, the sapphire earrings my grandfather gave me for my 16th birthday, and the collection of pieces I'd accumulated over the years. Instead, I stared into empty velvet compartments. Every single piece was gone. My heart started racing. I lifted each compartment, thinking maybe someone had reorganized things. Nothing. I checked the drawers underneath. Empty. I even looked behind the dresser, wondering if somehow the box had been knocked over and everything had fallen. But deep down, I knew what had happened. Someone had taken my jewelry, and there were only 3 other people in this house. I ran downstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. My parents were sitting in the living room, my dad reading the newspaper, and my mom scrolling through her phone. They looked up when I burst in, and I immediately noticed something in their expressions. Guilt. "Where's my jewelry?" I demanded, my voice shaking. My mom's face went pale, and she exchanged a look with my dad that confirmed my worst fears. "Honey, sit down. We need to talk." "No, I don't want to sit down. I want to know where my jewelry is. Every single piece is gone from my room." My dad folded his newspaper slowly, buying time. "Jessica, we can explain everything. It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" "Because it looks like someone went into my room and took all of my personal belongings without asking me." My mom finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We borrowed them." "You borrowed them? You borrowed my grandmother's necklace, my grandfather's earrings, the bracelet I bought with my first paycheck? You borrowed them for what?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. "Tyler got accepted into that study abroad program in Italy. You know, the one he's been talking about for months. It's an incredible opportunity for him." "What does that have to do with my jewelry?" "The program costs $15,000, my mom said quietly. "We didn't have that kind of money just sitting around, and the deadline to pay was last week. We tried to get a loan, but our credit isn't great right now because of the roof repairs we had to do last year." I felt like I was going to be sick. "So, you decided to steal from me?" "We didn't steal anything," my dad said defensively. "We're going to pay you back. Every penny. This is just temporary." "Where are they now?" "Where is my jewelry?" Another pause. Another exchanged glance. "We took them to Peterson's pawn shop on 5th Street, my mom admitted. "They gave us $8,000. It's not nearly what they're worth, I know, but it was enough to cover most of Tyler's expenses. $8,000. My grandmother's antique jewelry that had been in our family for generations. My grandfather's gifts that he'd saved up for months to buy. My own personal pieces that marked important moments in my life. All sold to strangers for $8,000. You had no right, I whispered, and then louder, you had absolutely no right to do that. Jessica, please try to understand. This is Tyler's future we're talking about. This program could change his life. It's an investment in his education. And what about my life? What about my things? Did you even consider asking me? We knew you'd say no, my dad said, as if that justified everything. That's when it hit me. They knew I'd say no, so they just went ahead and did it anyway. They knew I'd object to having my most precious possessions sold to fund my brother's vacation disguised as education, so they simply didn't give me a choice. In their minds, my feelings, my belongings, my consent didn't matter as much as Tyler's wants. Where is Tyler now? I asked. He's at the pre-departure orientation. He leaves for Italy in 3 days, my mom said, actually smiling a little as if she expected me to share in her pride. 3 days. My jewelry had been gone for a week, and my brother had known about it the entire time. He'd known they were selling my things to pay for his trip, and he'd said nothing. He'd let them do it. That night, I lay in bed staring at my empty jewelry box, replaying every family dinner where Tyler's needs came first, every birthday where his gifts were more expensive than mine, every time I was told I was the responsible one, while he was coddled and protected from consequences. I realized this wasn't just about jewelry. This was about 24 years of being treated as less important, less deserving, less loved. But I also realized something else. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't financially dependent on them. I had choices, and I could make them. The next morning, I drove to Peterson's pawn shop. The owner, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, remembered the transaction immediately when I described my parents and the jewelry. Yeah, I remember that sale. Beautiful pieces. I felt bad only giving them $8,000, but that's how pawn shops work. We have to make a profit when we resell. Did you still have any of it? He shook his head sadly. Sorry, honey. I sold most of it within 2 days. Had a dealer come in who specializes in antique jewelry. He bought the whole lot for $12,000. I kept one piece, though, because it reminded me of something my own grandmother used to wear. He disappeared into the back room and returned with my grandfather's sapphire earrings. These, I was going to give them to my daughter for her graduation next month, but if they're yours, they are. My grandfather gave them to me for my 16th birthday. He said sapphires would bring out my eyes. The man studied my face and smiled. He was right. Look, I'll sell them back to you for what I paid your parents, $150. It's not right. What happened to you? I bought back my earrings, but more importantly, I got the contact information for the antique dealer who had purchased the rest. His name was Robert, and when I called him, he was surprisingly sympathetic to my situation. I deal with this more often than you'd think, he told me over the phone. Family members selling things that don't belong to them. Some of the pieces are still in my shop. Would you like to come in and see what's available? That afternoon, I visited Robert's antique shop across town. He had kept several of my pieces, including my grandmother's pearl necklace and a gold bracelet that had belonged to my great-grandmother. The prices he quoted were fair, but still added up to more money than I had available. That's when I remembered something my grandmother had told me before she died. She had set up a small savings account for me, separate from everything else, and left the information in a sealed letter that my parents had given me after her funeral. I'd never opened it, thinking it was just sentimental words I wasn't ready to read. That evening, I finally broke the seal. Inside was a letter expressing her love and hopes for my future, along with account information for a savings account containing $12,000. At the bottom, she'd written, "This is for you alone, Jessica. Don't let anyone convince you to use it for anything but your own dreams and needs. You matter just as much as anyone else in this family, and don't ever forget that." It was like she knew. Even from beyond the grave, my grandmother was protecting me and reminding me of my worth. The next day, I returned to Robert's shop and bought back every piece of my jewelry that he still had. Some pieces were gone forever, sold to private collectors, but I managed to recover about 70% of what had been stolen from me. The total cost was $11,000, almost the entire inheritance my grandmother had left me, but it felt like the most important purchase I'd ever made. Tyler came home that evening with new luggage and travel clothes, excited about his departure the next morning. He was showing off his Italian phrase book to my parents when I walked into the living room wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace. The room went completely silent. "How do you have that?" my mom whispered. "I bought it back," I said simply. "You bought it back? From where?" "How did you even find it?" my dad demanded. "I tracked down the dealer who bought everything from the pawn shop. Turns out when you sell stolen goods, there's usually a paper trail." Tyler finally spoke up. "Stolen? Come on, Jess, that's a little dramatic, don't you think?" I turned to look at my brother, this 19-year-old kid who had never worked a day in his life, who had never been told no, who thought the world owed him everything he wanted. "Is it dramatic, Tyler?" Because last time I checked, taking someone else's property without their permission is exactly what stealing means. "But Mom and Dad said they'd pay you back. It's not like it was permanent." "When? When were they going to pay me back? And with what money? Did you ask them that before you let them sell my things to pay for your vacation?" "It's not a vacation, it's educational." "Right, which is why you spent the extra money on designer luggage and clothes instead of educational materials." I could see the reality starting to dawn on him. For the first time in his life, his actions had consequences, and those consequences were standing right in front of him wearing the jewelry he thought was gone forever. "How much did it cost you?" my mom asked quietly. $11,000. The number hung in the air like a bomb. Tyler's face went white as he realized that his trip had cost me not just my jewelry, but almost everything my grandmother had left me. "Jessica," my dad started, but I cut him off. "No, I'm done listening to excuses and justifications. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay me back every cent I spent recovering my own property, all $11,000. You took something that wasn't yours, sold it without permission, and spent the money. That's theft. I have receipts, I have documentation, and I have witnesses who can confirm that my jewelry was sold by people who had no legal right to sell it." "We can't just come up with $11,000, my mom protested. "Then you'll figure it out the same way you figured out how to come up with Tyler's program costs. Get a loan, pick up extra shifts, sell some of your own belongings. I don't really care how you do it, but you will make this right." Tyler finally found his voice. "What are you saying? That I can't go to Italy? I'm saying that your educational opportunity doesn't get to cost me my inheritance. If you want to go to Italy, figure out how to pay for it without stealing from me." "I didn't steal anything." "You knew what they were doing and you said nothing. You let them sell my things to pay for your trip. That makes you just as guilty as they are." The room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantelpiece. Finally, my dad spoke. "And if we don't pay you back? Then I'll file a police report for theft. I have all the documentation I need to prove that my property was taken and sold without my consent. I'm sure Tyler's study abroad program would be very interested to know that his tuition was paid for with stolen goods." I wasn't bluffing, and they knew it. I was done being the family doormat, done accepting that my needs were less important than Tyler's wants, done being told I should be grateful for scraps of attention and respect. Tyler didn't go to Italy that year. Instead, he got his first job at a local restaurant, working nights and weekends to help pay back the money they owed me. My parents took out a loan against their car and picked up extra work where they could. It took them 8 months, but they paid me back every dollar. The funny thing is, Tyler's gap year ended up being the best thing that ever happened to him. Working that restaurant job taught him the value of money and hard work in a way that 18 years of being handed everything never could. He eventually did go to Italy 2 years later, but he paid for it himself with money he'd saved from his job and a partial scholarship he earned through his improved work ethic. As for me, I moved out 2 months after the confrontation. I used the remaining $1,000 from my grandmother's account as a security deposit on a small apartment across town. I got the job from that interview, started building my own life, and learned to set boundaries with my family. My relationship with my parents changed forever that day. It had to. They realized that their older daughter wasn't going to accept being treated as less important anymore, and I realized that I didn't need their approval to value myself. We're not estranged, but we're not the same family we used to be either, and honestly, that's okay with me. The jewelry I recovered sits in a new jewelry box in my own apartment now, in my own bedroom, where no one can take it without my permission. Every time I see it, I remember not just my grandmother and grandfather, but also the day I finally stood up for myself, the day I decided I was worth fighting for. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to Tyler's trip, about the debt my parents had to take on, about the way our family dynamic changed. The answer is no. I don't feel bad about refusing to be stolen from. I don't feel bad about demanding respect. And I don't feel bad about showing my family that actions have consequences, even when those actions are committed by people who think they're entitled to whatever they want. My grandmother was right in her letter. I matter just as much as anyone else in this family. It just took me 24 years to truly believe it. Sometimes standing up for yourself means disappointing the people who should have protected you in the first place. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves respect in their family, and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below.